This video is brought to you by Squarespace. POV, you are Daredevil.
Oh, I get it!
I feel like when it comes to comics, Daredevil is arguably one of Marvel's most consistently well-written characters. Like, Matt's had a variety of incredible comic book runs with some of the best writers in the industry working on his books, from Chip Zdarsky to Brian Michael Bendis, and of course Frank Miller, who wrote what's widely accepted as the best Daredevil story ever written in Born Again. However, I can't lie, I was never the biggest fan of Mr. Murdock and didn't really keep up to date with his comics. Like, I knew the basics: he's a lawyer, he's blind, and is from Hell's Kitchen, just not the one with Gordon Ramsay.
And they're all fucking overcooked, raw. This is not normal.
But besides that, when it came to Daredevil, I was kind of in the dark. Well, at least that was until Netflix came out with a little show called Daredevil in 2015, and upon watching it, I started law school. Now, Marvel shows these days get a bit of a bad reputation for being, well, kinda shit, but this series was the first ever show connected to the MCU, and I suppose was Marvel's way of testing how audiences would react to a 13-episode TV series instead of a 2-hour-long movie. To be fair, at the time, this was probably a big gamble for Marvel, seeing if they'd be able to translate the MCU's success onto the small screen. Plus, choosing to base the show on Daredevil was probably a risk too, considering the last time casual viewers seen him was in the 2003 movie. So I guess it was kinda lucky for Marvel that Daredevil was an absolute hit, adapting some of his best known comics into arguably one of the best superhero shows ever made, still untouched by any of the Disney Plus shows to this day. Daredevil had an incredible narrative about Matt uncovering citywide corruption and various crime operations going on throughout New York, with the Kingpin Wilson Fisk at the centre of it all, who, by the way, is 100% the best villain in the entire MCU, just look at that man's forehead. Seriously though, for lack of a better term, the show didn't pull its punches, showcasing Matt's struggles with his morality and faith, trying to decide if murder is a line he's willing to cross in case the justice system fails to put Fisk behind bars. Not to mention, the show looked like a work of art with some beautiful cinematography, which is sort of juxtaposed with the insanely brutal fight scenes. Like, I'm not kidding, I watched the show back recently, and it's almost shocking how violent it gets in comparison to the rest of the MCU. I mean, Fisk literally decapitates this one Russian guy just because he interrupts his date with Vanessa. Oh no.
Vanessa!
Everything about Daredevil just worked. The themes, the nuanced characters, the acting, the vulnerability, that big beautiful bald head. Season 1 was utterly fantastic, and the following 2 seasons were just as good, if not better, introducing other notable characters like Elektra, Bullseye, and of course, the Punisher.
Judge, jury, executioner!
Another epic victory! Big win!
However, I'm sure some of you watching this are asking by now, why am I even talking about this show? I mean, sure, I'd love to talk about how good it is, but unfortunately that's not why I'm here. See, while I was watching Daredevil, I couldn't help but think, why has there never been a game made about him? Like, seriously, Daredevil almost seems perfect for the world of video games, yet there's never been a game made solely about him. Or at least, that's what I thought. Let's go back to the early 2000s, during a time when Marvel was kinda broke. So to alleviate their dire financial situation, Marvel resorted to selling the film rights to some of their most popular characters. This is what started the cinematic superhero boom of the early 2000s, with Fox producing the first X-Men film and Sony going on to make Spider-Man in 2002, both of which receiving critical acclaim and, more importantly, making their respective studios a fuck ton of money. Along with all these movies, there was a huge influx of superhero games coming out, and this is where I would like to introduce you to Encore, an American publishing company who at the time had purchased the game rights to Marvel characters like Captain America and Daredevil, the latter of which really caught the attention of 5000 Feet, a small studio who had only really worked on games with bigger developers, like helping 3DO port their Army Men series onto the PlayStation. But 5000 Feet, they had ambition. They didn't just want to help other developers, they wanted to make their very own game. And after establishing a working relationship with Encore, 5000 Feet pitched their idea for a video game based completely on Daredevil, and clearly this pitch went well, because by late 2001, 5000 Feet, with the backing of both Encore and Marvel, began development on a PlayStation 2 Daredevil game. Now, I can't lie, while doing my best to research this game's development, a lot of the articles I found cited this video by Unseen64 as a major source of information, cancellation. It's incredibly well researched, and I really recommend watching it for a more in-depth look at everything that went on at 5,000 feet. Cause fuck me, there's a lot. As for the game itself, the initial plan was to make a small-scale third-person action game with a relatively small budget. I mean, Marvel games weren't exactly known for their high quality, so expectations were kept relatively low, hence the restricted budget. With that being said though, 5,000 feet evidently had a good idea of what they wanted this game to be, as originally it was planned to showcase Daredevil's most iconic comic book moments in video game form, kinda celebrating this, at the time, obscure Marvel character's history. By all accounts, this phase of development was going pretty smoothly, and they were adapting Daredevil's abilities into the game in some pretty clever and fun ways. However, this would all change when 5,000 Feet's president, Tim Page, received a phone call from a friend who worked at Sony.
Yeah, Tim, you're not gonna believe this. You know that Daredevil game we're working on? Fox is making a movie about him now. It's gonna have Ben Affleck in it and Evanescence from what I know. What the fuck? Hello? Tim, are you still there?
See, with a movie now being made on Daredevil, and Marvel's overall quality on the rise thanks to Sam Raimi's upcoming Spider-Man movie, the expectations for this low-budget PS2 game instantly shot up. Sony was about to be swimming in money thanks to the aforementioned Spider-Man movie, and Encore definitely wanted to dive in too. Although admittedly, it may have been a little too late for them, as during this time they filed for bankruptcy and were bought by Navarre. Regardless of this, Encore, or Navarre, whoever was in charge I guess, still knew that Daredevil was about to gain a whole new level of mainstream popularity, and as such they now wanted the game to come out on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Due to this decision, the game would now need to meet the demands of both Microsoft and Sony's evaluation boards, who basically had final say on any third-party games trying to get on their consoles. Which is where we meet problem number one, Sony. But first, Squarespace. Sir, we're under attack! The enemy got past the front lines! What should we do? Calm down, General. Just answer me one question. Do they have a website? Sir, I really don't understand why that's relevant. Shut up, I'm doing an ad read. Just look at this lovely website I made using Squarespace's Blueprint AI. All I needed to do was answer a few quick prompts, and now I've got a great looking on-brand website. No fuss, no hassle, no stress. Yes sir, that looks great, but we've got bigger issues right now. I'm sure they aren't as big as getting paid though, are they? I mean, I do like money. Well great, because Squarespace gives you ample ways to make money too with their integrated payment options, whether that be selling your own products or even online courses. Take this, son. It's my How to Act in a Crisis course. I think you need it. Plus, take a look at all these marketing tools Squarespace offers you. I can just feel my audience growing as we speak. Oh, and don't get me started on all those analytics too. I have so much knowledge now. Just go to Squarespace right now to start a free trial, and once you've finished your site, use my link in the description or go to squarespace.com/AlexWebb to get 10% off your website or domain purchase. Now, Lieutenant, let's go see what you've been yapping about for this entire Now at this point, 5,000 Feet had already decided to massively expand the game's scope, going from a linear level-based game to a full-on open world with a densely populated Hell's Kitchen for Daredevil to explore. It was also decided that to further tie in with the movie, the game would now come out around about the same time during February 2003. In the meantime though, 5,000 Feet were busy trying to keep Sony happy. See, when it came to the evaluation boards, Microsoft were pretty chill, being relatively new to console games, so they were happy for 5,000 Feet to basically do whatever they wanted. Sony, on the other hand, were a fucking nightmare. Meeting with 5,000 Feet every month, they constantly demanded changes be made to the game, which of course 5,000 Feet couldn't say no to because Sony could then just go, lol, no PlayStation for you. Basically, whenever Sony wanted to change or add something into the game, 5,000 Feet kinda had to do it, and from what I'm aware, Sony had a long list of requests, with one of the more notable changes being that they wanted Daredevil to be able to grind on rails like in the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games. Would you like to add a Thrasher hoodie to his costume too? Now, these constant changes not only put pressure on 5,000 Feet, but they also really pissed off Marvel, who wanted the game to be faithful to its source material, and last time I checked, Matt didn't own a skateboard. Sony and Marvel butted heads constantly over this game's creative direction. Marvel again wanted to keep it comic accurate, while Sony didn't care about any of that, and wanted to include stuff that was popular at the time, with poor 5,000 Feet stuck in the middle of them, trying their best to please both sides. Anyway, with all these new demands and the scope of the game constantly expanding, 5,000 Feet obviously had a lot on their plate, so they hired more staff and got to work developing this much bigger game. Which brings us to problem number 2, The game engine. Initially, back when Daredevil was a small, level-based game, 5000 Feet were using the Renderware engine to develop it, a really popular engine at the time, which was used to make various games like GTA 3, GTA Vice City, Burnout, and more importantly, the Jackass game. Hell yeah, baby.
Dude, I better hurry up and get butt naked.
Unfortunately though, with the game's now expanded scope and way more money going into it, Encore didn't want to empty their bank accounts any further, so they decided that instead of using renderware, 5000 Feet could just build their own engine. How do you think this went? To be fair, 5000 Feet brought on a whole new engineer team to help create this engine, and it did work decently well for a while. But the bigger and more ambitious Daredevil got, the more the engine started to, break. The engine simply couldn't handle the requirements of 5000 Feet's open world. Assets need to be redesigned constantly, and Hell's Kitchen was downsized more and more in an effort to get the game to actually work, eventually leading to 5000 Feet scrapping the open world concept entirely and just opting to make the game level based once again. Which honestly is a huge shame, because it seemed like 5000 Feet had some incredibly cool ideas when it came to the actual game. Firstly, their aim was to make an open world which would compete with the other open world games at the time. Like for example, the first Spider-Man movie tie-in game had just released during all of this, and while it wasn't open world, it still had a nicely modelled Manhattan for Spidey to swing around in. But 5000 Feet looked at it and knew they could do better. So not only did they attempt to make a fully explorable Hell's Kitchen, they created a traversal system where along with the grinding, you could also swing around using Daredevil's Billy Club, as it would actually attach onto buildings, allowing you to swing from them, unlike in the Spider-Man game where you just, swing from the sky. Matt's Billy Club was going to be an integral part of the combat system too, as you not only could throw it at someone's head, but also make it ricochet off walls and objects like these explosive barrels.
You little fuckers, I hate barrels!
Perhaps the feature which stands out the most to me though, would have been Daredevil's blind vision, allowing you to see the world the same way Daredevil does. No, it doesn't just make your screen go black for 5 minutes. Rather, you enter a kind of radar mode, allowing you to see through walls and picking up on subtle sounds like someone's heartbeat. Another really cool way of integrating Matt's powers into the game, and basically doing detective mode 6 years before Rocksteady did it in Arkham Asylum.
He copied my whole fucking flow!
If it wasn't already pretty obvious by now, 5000 Feet had a clear passion for the character and expertly managed to translate that into their game. The story as well sounded really interesting, taking inspiration from the comic Elektra Lives Again, and the game would even begin with the Kingpin being assassinated and Foggy, Matt's best friend, gone missing. Not to mention, after asking numerous times, they managed to convince Marvel to let them use the Punisher, which sounds absolutely delicious if you ask me. It's just a shame problem number 3 happened. Drugs. See, as I previously said, 5000 Feet hired a lot more employees to keep up with the demands of the game, like the engineer team I mentioned earlier, who was in charge of the game's, great engine. Now, when it came to these new employees, some were probably great additions to the team and had some excellent insights to offer. However, others showed up high to work. Yeah, so according to reports and first-hand accounts, some members of the staff were developing drug addictions rather than a Daredevil game, and there's even stories about members of the team showing up to meetings so intoxicated that nobody had a clue what they were trying to say. On top of this, the engineer team was allegedly demanding more control over the game, despite the fact their engine was barely able to work, and this caused a civil war to break out between the engineer team and the rest of the company, while any progress on the game froze to a halt. All of this combined with constant technical issues and Sony still demanding changes, probably asking them to add in Master Chief off the back of Halo coming out, it all just became way too much for 5000 Feet to handle, and the game was unfortunately delayed until the end of 2003, missing the Fox film's release date entirely. Although again, maybe that wasn't a bad thing. As far as I know from this point, 5000 Feet were still actively working on the game. They were not willing to give up on it, and with a lot of perseverance, by March 2004, they were nearly finished. They had ironed out the tech issues for the most part, a full draft of the story was almost done, and the game had been renamed to Daredevil the Man Without Fear, an obvious nod to the Frank Miller comic. Despite all the turmoil and hassle that 5000 Feet had gone through, it seemed like they were almost at that finish line. All they needed was Marvel to approve it, and the game could finally hit store shelves. So of course, when Marvel seen the near finished product, they said no. Apparently, they didn't like the game after all the changes Sony had made to it, saying it became unrepresentative of the Daredevil character, and at this point, Encore didn't have any more money to throw at it, and 5000 Feet had lost way too much staff. So, after over 2 years of development, numerous technical problems, a war with the engineer team, and various Class A drugs, Daredevil the Man Without Fear was cancelled, and for the next 20 years it stayed that way, with barely anything being released to the public. That was until October 2023, when somehow a PS2 build of the game was leaked onto the site Hidden Palace, finally giving people a chance to play this long forgotten game. The build itself is pretty buggy given the fact it's a prototype, but if you can look past that, it still had more or less the stuff I described before, with the gameplay being actually pretty fun. Honestly, what I was more shocked at was the fact that Marvel looked at this and thought it didn't represent Daredevil well. I mean, sure, the grinding's dumb, but just look at some of these cutscenes, man. How can you deny how good this looks? Plus, Elektra fights Bullseye inside an electrified steel cage. I'll have one ticket, please. On a real though, obviously this is just a prototype build, but it still gives us a really good look at what this game could have been, if it wasn't for all the, problems 5,000 feet faced. As of today though, other than this leaked build, the game's been more or less forgotten about, 5,000 Feet has long closed their doors, and Daredevil still doesn't have a solo game. Like, come on man, he isn't even in Rivals yet. Fortunately though, when it comes to comics and shows, he's had way more luck, and currently, while I'm editing this, Daredevil Born Again will be hitting Disney Plus in like a few days, and I genuinely can't wait to see what the show has in store. Although if they kill Foggy, I'm gonna crash out. Seriously though, Daredevil is one of Marvel's best characters, and hopefully in the near future, he gets a video game on par with everything else. But as for now, you know what I'll be watching.
I'm not seeking penance for what I've done, Father. And I'm asking forgiveness for what I'm about to do.
Maybe it isn't only about justice, Matt. Maybe it's about you having an excuse to hit someone. Maybe you just can't stop yourself.
I don't want to stop.
What exactly are you going to do?
Let the devil out.
You know you're one bad day away from being me. I want to save the city, like you, only on a scale that matters.
Come on, Maddie. Get to work.
Only I do the one thing that you can't. You hit them and they get back up. I hit them and they stay down.
Guilt can be a good thing. I don't know what you didn't do or what you should have done. But the guilt means your work is not yet finished.
Bless me, Father, for I've sinned.